videos, please subscribe for more updates.
Okay, we gotta chat. There was a comment that struck a chord with me. They were saying how movies, they just don't sound right anymore. More specifically, they were talking about how hard it is to hear the dialogue.
Can you hear me now?
Dialogue is way too quiet. You're just stuck on your couch with the remote control, riding that volume button, just trying to understand what is going on in the storyline. We gotta ask ourselves, like, why is this happening? Is it really just bad sound mixing?
And that's why we do it.
Is there something more at play, like are actors mumbling more, or has something deeper changed in how movies are being made? Like, this isn't a small issue. This is a fundamental shift in how Hollywood approaches sound. And today I'm breaking down exactly why movie dialogue is getting harder to hear, how we got here, and whether there's any way possible to fix it. Oh, and before we get into it, if you guys are enjoying this kind of content, smash that subscribe button and hit that like button so we can keep making deep dives like this one. Let's waste no time, let's get right into it. Let's rewind to the early days of cinema, and this is actually my favorite time right here. It's the silent film era. Have you guys watched any silent films? Post the favorite one in the comment section below because I love this era. But if you guys have watched any of them, you guys will know movies, they didn't even have recorded dialogue. Instead, the actors actually had to exaggerate their expressions and the music was played live in theaters. Let's fast forward to 1927 when Warner Brothers came out with a film called The Jazz Singer.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
Now, this right here, this film, it changed everything for Hollywood, and here's why. Because it was the very first film with synchronized dialogue. And from that, sound actually became an essential part of storytelling. But here's the thing, early sound recording, it was very primitive. The actors, they literally had to speak directly into these big old tin cans, and it wasn't like this right here, this kind of shotgun mic. And they didn't have anything like this, right? It was a huge tin can, and they had to speak directly into it. That means that everything was recorded live on set with no real way to adjust it later. So they really had to make sure that everything was crystal clear and dialogue was the priority. Fast forward to the golden age of Hollywood. I'm meaning like the 1940s and 1950s.
Turn on to that, please.
That's how it all began.
This is where things actually got a little bit better. Like, movies were actually mixed with a simple but effective rule. Dialogue always sits at the front. Sound designers actually knew that if audiences couldn't hear what was being said, they wouldn't understand the story. And since theaters had either mono or stereo speakers, everything was actually mixed for clarity. But then the 1970s came along and technology changed yet again. It changed everything, right? We got Dolby Stereo, we got surround sound, we got more speakers in theaters, which meant more complex soundscapes. Like movies, for example, like Star Wars.
I am your father.
It pushed sound design to this whole new level. From that, dialogue wasn't just sitting front and center. It had to compete with the music, the sound effects, and the ambient noise in the background, right? And that's when Hollywood started chasing immersion. They just wanted audiences to feel like they were inside the movies. Instead of keeping dialogue crisp and clear, they started blending it into the background, making it feel like it's real life.
Been a long time.
This actually worked in theaters. Like, it had the big surround sound systems that could separate the voices from everything else going on. But as the time went on, Hollywood just kept pushing this immersion further, and something just got lost along the way. Fast forward to the 2000s, and two big things happened. I mean, two major things happened. First, digital filmmaking took over. That meant dialogue was no longer recorded and mixed the same way. Instead of carefully balancing sound, they started experimenting. And they added more layers and more effects and more bass and more reverb. The results, well, more immersive soundscapes, but dialogue, it became just another element in the chaos. Secondly, actors. Yes, actors changed how they performed. Back in the day, actors had to project their voices. They literally had to. Like, theaters didn't have surround sound, so they spoke clearly, loudly, and they enunciated every single word. But today we have actors who whisper, they mutter, they trail off, and everything is about this naturalism, right? Let's take Christopher Nolan, for example. I love him. He's a great director and one of the greatest directors of all time, I would say. But anyway, let's take one of his films, The Dark Knight Rises.
Powerful agents to the uninitiated.
People are actually still talking about how hard it was to understand that character. Now, don't get me wrong, Tom Hardy, he was a great actor. He's a phenomenal actor. But in this character, his voice was muffled, and it was deep, and it was distorted, and it was so hard to understand him. And the worst thing of it, it wasn't fixed in post. Christopher Nolan, he left it as a choice. He left it that way because he wanted it to sound real. And Nolan isn't the only one that's doing this. Like, there's more and more directors that are prioritizing this immersion over clarity, and it's making movies harder to understand. And here's the worst part of it all. It's not getting better, because now most people aren't watching movies in theaters anymore. They're watching it in the comfort of their own home. And Hollywood isn't mixing movies for home viewing. And here's why that is actually a huge problem, because movies today are still being mixed for massive surround sound systems, but most people are watching on either a flat screen TV, your phone, your laptop, and all these devices actually have very bad speakers, right? Let's take a TV, for example. TV speakers are small, they're thin, and they usually actually face the wrong way. They're either pointing downward or they're pointing backwards against the back wall instead of directly at you. That means that the sound itself is bouncing off of walls, it's getting lost in the room, and it's burying dialogue even further.
Is the mask muffling my voice?
And, drum roll, it gets worse, because streaming platforms, they compress audio to save bandwidth. So even if a movie was mixed well, by the time it gets to your screen, it's been squeezed, it's been flattened, and it's making dialogue even harder to hear.
I did not tell him to do that.
What is the solution? Honestly, it isn't an easy one. Yeah, you can adjust your TV's audio settings, and some TVs actually have this dialogue enhancement mode, or you can actually buy a sound bar, or you can turn on the subtitles, which, let's just be real with each other, most of us are already doing that, right? We're all doing that. I watch 90% of my films now with subtitles on. But let's just be real again, because none of that actually gets to the core of the problem. Like, that it doesn't fix the real problem. The only real solution here, Hollywood, they need to get their act together. Like, directors, they need to stop burying dialogue for the sake of immersion. And actors, they need to find a balance between realism and clarity. And post-sound, they need to start considering how people are actually watching movies. Until that happens, well, guess what? We're stuck with subtitles, sound bars, and constant volume adjustments. And the worst part of it all, it's all just a band-aid. Because the real problem is how movies are being made. So now, I want to hear from you guys. What's the worst movie you've had to constantly adjust the volume for? Drop a comment, because I want to see how bad this actually has gotten for everyone else. Like, we watched a film, what was it? We watched it yesterday. Oh gosh, I can't think of it. I'll post in the comments when I think of it, but I could barely hear the dialogue. But yeah, post yours in the comments section, building it out for another week. We've got something very special coming in the pipeline, so more details on that later on. Until then, practice